black woman paid for Hell's Angels gas. Days later, they repaid her in a way that silenced the town. In a half-forgotten town where old flags still wave and new faces aren't welcome, a 27-year-old black woman fights to keep her late grandfather's crumbling church from shutting its doors. It's the only place where local homeless kids can find warmth and food. One chilly morning at the gas station, a biker in a dirty leather vest stands helpless as his card gets declined and his phone payment won't go through. He's been riding through the night, desperate to hold his brother's hand through the final hours of cancer. He pleads with the station clerk, but the locals mutter that he's a scammer, and the clerk calls the sheriff instead. But she quietly steps forward, pays for his tank without a word, and disappears into the cold dawn. 3 days later, that same small town wakes to the roar of dozens of bikers, and the people who once mocked her kindness have no words for what happens next. In a town that barely makes the map anymore, where cracked sidewalks run past rusting trucks and chipped storefronts that haven't seen a customer in years, the old flags still flutter stubborn in the wind. Faded colors that whisper about the good old days, back when the wrong kind of new face was reason enough to lock a door or cross the street. Here, people keep their eyes down and their gossip loud. They watch from behind lace curtains, but never meet your gaze if they can help it. They know your name, your mother's shame, and the last time your porch light stayed on too long after midnight. But there, tucked behind a leaning oak that should have fallen years ago, stands a church that should have fallen too. The wood is splintered, the roof patched with mismatched tin sheets that shudder in the wind. Some windows are boarded, others sag with stained glass, so faded you have to squint to see the saints they once told stories about. And yet, when dusk rolls in and the bitter air presses against cracked walls, you can hear laughter inside, the small, bright sounds of children who know nowhere else to go. This place survives because Maya Thompson refuses to let it die. She's 27 years old, born in this same town that would rather she left it behind. Her grandfather, Reverend Elijah Thompson, was the first black pastor this town ever grudgingly called their own. When doors were slammed shut to his congregation, he opened his church wide enough for everyone with nowhere else to stand. He fed the drifters, the drunkards, the families that polite company called lazy. He preached under a leaking roof with Bibles missing half their pages. And he made that old building a sanctuary when nowhere else wanted that word to mean what it should. When he passed, most thought the doors would close for good. But Maya was 16 then, and she saw the promise tucked in his wrinkled hands when they lowered him under red clay. Now, over a decade later, she stands in the same pulpit when the old wood creaks in the wind and tells herself she'll hold it all together just one more season. Maybe just until the next food pantry box shows up. Maybe just until the next hot meal is scraped together from stale bread and dented cans donated by folks too ashamed to throw them straight in the trash. Maya works nights in the only diner that still flips its neon open sign when the sun dips behind broken telephone poles. She pours coffee for the same men who mutter that she's wasting her youth on charity instead of moving somewhere better. She scrubs plates until her fingers crack from the hot water. Counts tips that never stretch enough to patch the holes in the roof she climbs herself during daylight. Sometimes you'll see her balancing on that old ladder, hammer in one hand, prayer in the other, willing the splintered beams to hold just long enough for the next cold front to pass. And through it all, the neighbors who turn away on Main Street know her story better than they know their own. They know Maya Thompson works 2 jobs to keep stray children fed on Sundays. They know she locks the church doors at night, not to keep the town's cruelty out, but to keep hope from blowing away with the dry leaves that dance across the parking lot. They know she should have left. And yet, every time the sun rises behind that leaning oak, they see her there again. Sleeves rolled, hair tied back, shoulders squared against a world that never gave her a reason to stay, yet somehow can't chase her away. In this town stuck in time, Maya Thompson is the only new thing they never asked for, the only truth they wish they could ignore, and the only proof that sometimes the smallest stubborn kindness can rattle the rust off forgotten iron gates. It's barely dawn when Maya Thompson slips out the back door of the chapel and locks it behind her with a key so worn the teeth are almost smooth. She tucks it into her coat pocket alongside the crumpled $5 bill meant for gas, milk, and maybe bread if the price is kind that morning. The town is still half asleep, quiet enough for Maya to hear her own breath cloud in the cold, quiet enough that the old oak beside the church creaks like it might whisper secrets only she still wants to hear. The road to the gas station cuts through fields that once grew corn high enough to hide in. Now they lie low and stubborn, brown stubble poking through frost. Maya's car rattles over potholes she's memorized by the jolt in her spine. She hums to herself, half prayer, half memory, the same way her grandfather used to when he'd drive this route to visit the old folks who couldn't make it to Sunday service. The gas station sits on the edge of town like a guard post, the last place before the fields spread out into nowhere. It's the only one left. A squat, flat-roof box with a flickering sign that pretends to stay bright, but hums and dims when the wind slaps it too hard. Maya pulls in slow, parks by the only pump that doesn't eat dollar bills without spitting gas back. She steps out, pulls her coat tighter around her shoulders, breath hanging in the air like ghost smoke. But she isn't alone this morning. At the next pump, under the same cold neon buzz, a man stands half-folded over the handles of a battered motorcycle. His shoulders are wide but slumped, wrapped in a leather vest so worn it's more scars than hide. An old helmet scratched and dulled hangs from a frayed bungee cord on the back seat, his shivering big hands rough enough to look like they've laid brick, poured concrete, broken more than a few fights. His breath comes out in short clouds, a rhythm that says he's been there longer than he should have. Maya watches from the corner of her eye as she pulls the pump handle, waiting for the click of the meter to remind her how little she has to spend. She can hear him talking to the clerk through the greasy glass window that never fully closes. His voice is low, cracked from cold and hours on the road. She catches pieces of it, drifting on the dawn breeze. Card won't swipe. Battery's dead. Please, man. My brother's in hospice. Just let me get enough to make it there. Inside, the clerk leans against the counter like this is entertainment. A skinny kid, local smug smirk under the flick of a bad fluorescent bulb. He twirls the phone cord around his finger, eyeing the biker like he's deciding if he's worth the trouble. From the parking lot, a couple of old pickups idle. Men inside sip burnt coffee, eyes sharp and small, amused at the stranger begging. One cracks his window just enough for his voice to carry. Ought to go back where you came from. Nobody here owes you a dime, boy. The biker doesn't look at them. He just presses his hands together like a man who knows he can't afford to be angry right now. Maya sees how his shoulders stiffen under that broken vest. Pride fighting panic. He leans closer to the glass, pleads again. His voice lifts just enough for her to hear every word this time, clear as the frost on her windshield. Please, my brother. He's got maybe hours left. I promised him I'd be there. I swear to God I'll pay you back. I'll leave my license. Whatever you want. Just let me top off the tank. Please, man, please. The clerk's eyes flick past the biker to the idling trucks. He smirks at the audience, rolls his eyes so slow Maya can almost hear them creak in their sockets. He reaches for the receiver, presses it to his shoulder, and says loud enough for the watching men to catch every syllable. Yeah, sheriff got a drifter out here causing a scene. Says he ain't got no way to pay. Want to send someone by? The men in the trucks chuckle low, engines rumbling like they're in on the joke. Maya's pump clicks off, an empty pop that snaps her out of the warmth she'd wrapped around her thoughts. She watches the biker's shoulders slump just a fraction, like that last bit of hope slipped off his spine and fell somewhere in the dark under that rusty bike. And in that moment, standing under buzzing neon, the dawn not quite ready to rise, Maya Thompson feels something stir in her chest that's heavier than pity and sharper than anger. She doesn't know his name, doesn't know what life put him here, doesn't know if he's lying or desperate or both. All she knows is the look she's seen too many times. The look of a good promise about to break because nobody cared enough to help it hold. Maya doesn't plan it. She doesn't rehearse a speech or weigh the cost the way her tired mind usually does, counting every dollar twice, every stray penny pressed into her palm at the diner after midnight. She just feels the weight shift in her pocket. Hears the clerk's lazy drawl drifting through the glass. Sees the biker's shoulders bow like a tree about to split under too much winter ice. And that's enough. She steps forward slow, boots crunching on the salt-stained concrete. The old pickups rumble quiet behind her. Engines idling, windows cracked just wide enough for stale laughter to slip out. One man snorts under his breath, calls out toward Maya without even looking her in the face. "Ain't your business, girl. Let the bum bake." Maya doesn't look back. She walks up to the glass, taps once to make the clerk pause mid-smirk. Her glove creaks as she pulls the crumpled bills from her pocket, the last of this week's tips. The cash meant for bread, a jug of milk, maybe new socks for one of the boys at the church whose shoes fall apart faster than he can outgrow them. She flattens the bills on the glass so the clerk can see every wrinkle. Doesn't flinch when he raises an eyebrow, when his mouth twists like he's about to spit something mean or clever. She just holds his stare until he slides the pump control back on. Flicks the switch with a shrug that says, "Fine, not my money lost?" He lifts the receiver off his shoulder. Mutters to the sheriff, "There's nothing to see here after all." The biker turns as if waking from a dream, half-turned nightmare. He looks at Maya like he's seeing her for the first time. Eyes rimmed red from wind and worry. The rough lines in his face deeper now that he's not fighting to keep them hidden. His mouth opens, searching for words that don't show up fast enough. His hand twitches toward his pocket, empty, then drops back to his side in defeat. "Ma'am, I can't let you. You don't even know me." He rasps, voice cracked from the cold, from the begging, from the shame of needing to beg at all. Maya shakes her head once, small, soft. No words. She doesn't need him to explain, doesn't want him to promise anything he can't keep. She just nudges the pump handle toward him, curls his calloused fingers around cold metal, the smallest bridge in a town built on fences. He tries again, voice rougher now. "I swear to God I'll pay you back. You don't know what this means, my brother." But Maya is already stepping back. She folds her empty glove back around her palm, tucks her chin into her collar, turns toward her car without waiting for him to finish. She knows if she stands there long enough, she'll start talking too. And she's learned that sometimes words break things that silence can hold together. Behind her, the clerk's snicker bubbles up again, floats out the door toward the idling pickups. A voice she doesn't know whose cracks out from the cracked window. "Soft-hearted fool. There she goes, feeding strays again." Maya doesn't answer. She slides behind the wheel, feels the engine rattle to life under her foot. The biker is still standing by the pump, stunned, one hand gripping the nozzle, the other half raised like he doesn't know whether to wave or pray. Maybe both. Maybe neither. She pulls out slow, tires crunching over the frost. The first pale threads of sunrise just starting to paint the horizon with colors the town won't bother to notice. She glances once in the rearview mirror, catches the shape of him filling his tank, head bowed like he's whispering something to the morning air. She doesn't know his name. He doesn't know hers. She doesn't know that this moment, a handful of crumpled bills, a kindness with no strings, no receipt, will roll through this town like thunder when the engines come. All she knows is the road ahead, the old oak waiting back at the chapel, and the warmth that flickers in her chest against the cold that never seems to leave. Word doesn't just travel in towns like this. It crawls under doors and through window cracks like a chill draft that never leaves. By the time Maya slides her apron over her shoulders that evening at the diner, her name's already slipped from mouth to mouth, table to table, sweetened with ridicule and sharpened by small-town spite. The diner is the kind of place that sells more gossip than coffee. Faded linoleum floors that haven't shone since before Maya was born. Cracked vinyl booths patched with duct tape. And the bell over the door that jingles when someone important enough to deserve a nod walks in. Maya weaves between the tables, refilling mugs with weak brew and wiping crumbs off laminated menus so old the photos of the pancakes are bleached to ghost shapes. At the corner booth, two regulars hunch low over chipped mugs, steam curling between their muttered words. They don't lower their voices enough. Maybe they don't care if she hears. Maybe they want her to. One leans back, scratches at the sweat stain creeping up his collar, and says it with a snort that makes the other wheeze. Heard that church girl gave her last dollar to some biker junkie. Stranger in town didn't even know his name. The other lifts his mug, crooked teeth glinting in the diner's yellow light. Soft always was soft like her granddaddy. Bums and drifters. That's who she feeds. Maya sets a fresh pot on the warmer, back turned so they don't see her jaw tighten. She's learned to let it pass through her. Words that would stick like burrs if she let them catch. She wipes down the counter, hums under her breath, lets their laughter fade under the hiss of the old coffee machine. She finishes her shift late, same as always. The tips are thin. Coins that rattle in her pocket all the way back to the chapel. She drives through streets that shrink when the sun sets. Shadows swallowing corners where kids once played stickball before the fields dried up. And the laughter faded into locked doors and shut blinds. When she climbs the church steps, her landlord's truck is waiting at the curb, tires half sunk in the mud, a single headlight cracked like a broken promise. He leans against the rusted hood, arms folded tight across a windbreaker 2 sizes too small. He doesn't greet her by name. He never does. Just spits tobacco juice into the weeds and wipes his chin with the back of his hand. Maya, he starts like he's testing how her name tastes tonight. Heard some talk around. Heard you're inviting trouble around this place. Maya pushes the heavy chapel door open, waits for the hinges to creak like old bones. Not sure what you mean, Mr. Kinsey, she says, voice flat, soft. A calmness she learned from her grandfather. The calm that keeps anger from making enemies you can't afford. He shifts his weight, thumbs hooked in his belt. Biker trash, that's what I mean. Strangers sniffing around. Bad element, Maya. Folks don't like it. Makes them nervous. You know how it goes. She doesn't answer right away. The sanctuary behind her is cold. She can feel the draft slide around her ankles where the floorboards never quite meet. She studies him. The way he won't meet her eyes for more than a heartbeat. She knows the next thing out of his mouth before he says it. But still, it stings. Leases month to month. You know that. Maybe it's time to think about moving on. Church like this. Lot of trouble for a young woman alone. Lot of mouths whispering. Maya just nods. Polite as prayer. I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Kinsey. He pushes himself off the hood like he just won something. He spits again, slides into his truck without another word. The engine coughs twice before it rumbles to life, tail lights smearing red across the chapel steps as he rolls away slow like he wants her to watch him go. Inside, Maya locks the door behind her. She flicks on the old lamp beside the pulpit, a soft glow that pools on the peeling paint, the warped floorboards, the rows of second-hand pews with cushions that never matched. She steps down the aisle, drags the battered stepladder beneath the leak that drips steady when the night turns damp. She climbs up, hammer in one hand, scrap of tin in the other, tapping nails through hope that bends but won't break. She works until her arms ache, until the drip quiets for now, until the cold settles in her bones like an old friend. Only when she climbs down does she let her eyes drift to the photo above the pulpit. Reverend Elijah Thompson, collar crisp, eyes soft behind thick glasses, one hand raised mid-blessing over a congregation that never stopped needing what he had to give. Sometimes Maya wonders if he'd shake his head at the things she does now, if he'd tell her the world's too mean for soft hands and empty pockets. But in that faded picture, he's smiling just enough to remind her why she keeps the doors open, why she keeps the leak patched, why she keeps her last dollar folded for someone whose name she might never know. Outside, the town's rumors spin like dry leaves in a restless wind. Inside, Maya Thompson stands beneath a cross her grandfather built with his own rough hands and whispers to herself that kindness never rots, not even here. 3 mornings later, the town wakes not to birdsong or the soft scrape of brooms against cracked porches, but to a low, rolling growl that shakes window panes loose in their brittle frames. It starts as a hum in the distance, like thunder that hasn't made up its mind whether to break the sky open or roll on by. But then it grows teeth-deep. Throaty roars layered one over the other until the air itself vibrates through curtains and door frames and the tin roof of Maya Thompson's old chapel. On Maya's street, a single crooked ribbon of patched tar and gravel that splits the town's pride from its shame. Blinds snap shut fast enough to rattle glass in the frames. Porch lights flick on though the sun's already up. Behind those drawn blinds, mouths whisper curses half-formed, prayers half-remembered. Fingers tap phone screens, ready to dial the sheriff before the first bike even swings to a stop. But they come anyway. A dozen Harleys at first. Big, low-slung frames with chrome that catches the morning sun and throws it back like a dare. Riders swing their boots down slow, stand tall in leather patched so heavy with road grit and stitched memories, it tells a story. Even silence can't hush. Engines idle loud enough to drown out the gossip that leaks through cracked windows. And then, like a ripple through still water, more arrive, another handful, then a few more still. Until the street that's never seen more than a dusty farm truck idling by the chapel fence now hums with the deep heartbeat of chrome and pistons. Their jackets bear the same patch, a winged skull. An old name folks only whisper when they want to sound tougher than they are. Hell's Angels in this town. That name drips from dry lips like a threat. But here they stand, boots on Maya's buckled sidewalk, helmets cradled in rough hands that know oil, road rash, and the ache of miles run out for reasons nobody else would ride for. Inside the chapel, Maya feels it before she hears the knock. The way the air changes, the way her heart jumps like it used to when her grandfather would clap his hands once to hush a room. She wipes dust from her palms onto her skirt, pushes her hair back, breathes out slow like she's bracing for bad news she's been expecting all her life. The knock comes soft, so gentle it hardly belongs to the fist that carries it. She cracks the heavy door just enough to see him standing there. The biker from the gas station, the stranger with cracked knuckles, and a voice that had splintered under the weight of a promise he thought he'd break. Today, He stands straighter. His eyes are clearer than she remembers, though red rings still cling to the edges like smoke after a fire. His vest looks the same, patched, scuffed, but now it sits on him like armor instead of a burden. "Morning, Miss Thompson," he says, his voice deep but careful, like he's afraid the door might swing shut again if he breathes too loud. Maya nods once. She doesn't ask how he knows her name. In towns like this, names travel faster than forgiveness. He lifts a hand, scratches behind his ear like he's searching for the right words. Up close, she sees oil beneath his nails, a smear of road dust in the line of his neck. This man rides for someone else, Maya thinks. Not himself. "Name's Harlan Reed," he says at last, voice steadying with the shape of it. "Don't reckon you'd remember, but 3 mornings back. You bought me gas I couldn't pay for." Maya almost smiles, but the weight of his eyes holds hers in place. She nods again. Small, a gentle yes that doesn't need words. Harlan shifts his weight, boot scraping soft on the chapel step. He looks past her for half a second, eyes flicking to the dark warmth inside the sanctuary. The cracked pews, the way light pulls through mismatched glass like a patchwork quilt. "I made it," he says, and the words crack just enough to make her lean closer. "I got there. My brother, he held my hand, went out with his favorite song on, talking my ear off. Same as when we were kids. He wasn't alone. 'Cause of you." Maya wants to say something that it was nothing, that it was only money, that she didn't do it for thanks. But the words stick in her throat like honey turned cold. She sees the flicker behind Harlan's eyes. Not sadness exactly, but the raw edge left when grief passes through a man too fast to dull the blade. He glances back over his shoulder. Maya follows his gaze. The line of bikes rumbling soft. The men and women perched on fenders and curbs, helmets in their laps, heads turned toward the chapel like it's the only thing worth guarding in this stubborn corner of the world. "My brothers don't forget," Harlan says, the words simple but heavy enough to bow the steps beneath him. "You didn't know me, didn't have to help me, but you did, so we figured we'd come by, figured we'd help a little too." His hand dips into the pocket of his vest, pulls out nothing more than a folded scrap of paper, an envelope, corners soft with road miles. He presses it into her palm, rough fingers brushing hers so light she almost thinks she imagined it. "Don't open it yet," he says, voice softer now, the roar of the engines behind him filling the silence he leaves. "There's more coming. Just know we ain't here to cause you trouble. We're here 'cause trouble's been knocking at your door long enough, Miss Thompson. Time someone knocked back." Maya glances down at the envelope. Plain as dry bread, plain as a promise kept by men the town swore would never carry anything but fear and fire. She looks up at Harlan Reed, this stranger whose story is now tangled with hers like 2 roots wrapped beneath the same stubborn earth. And behind him, the convoy waits. Leather and chrome, road dust and quiet vows. The living proof that sometimes the smallest open hand can call back an army no sheriff's badge can scatter. If the sound of a dozen Harleys rolling up a cracked street was enough to shake loose the town shutters, the sight of them staying was enough to rattle every door still pretending it could keep the world at bay. By noon that day, rumors had bloomed like weeds in every corner, booth, barbershop, and church pew not nailed shut. "They're criminals," muttered old men at the diner Maya scrubbed clean each night. "Gang trouble, that's what she's brought here. Those bikers will ruin everything we've kept quiet." In this town, quiet was its own gospel, the kind that left no room for strangers to settle, no room for rough hands to mend what polite once let rot. But now the roar of engines had become the pulse of something nobody could name without spitting after. The sheriff, a barrel of a man with a badge so polished you could almost see the fear behind it, showed up by afternoon, boots crunching gravel at the chapel gate. His cruiser idled at the curb like a threat that couldn't quite make up its mind whether to purr or growl. Harlan Reed met him on the front steps. His vest was zipped to the throat, a fresh patch stitched over the old scars. He didn't raise his voice, didn't puff his chest like the boys in town who thought respect was something you could squeeze out of fear. He just stood there, arms folded easy, like a man who'd learned a lifetime ago that storms pass, but roots hold. Noise complaints. The sheriff barked first, waving a clipboard thick with forms nobody read. Trespassing warnings. This is a church, not a clubhouse. These men. He jabbed a finger over Harlan's shoulder at the row of bikers posted up like weathered sentinels along the chapel fence. These men need to move on before you drag down decent folk with you. Harlan's answer was the kind you carry in your bones when you've got nothing left to fear. He didn't flinch when the sheriff leaned in close enough to smell the road dust still clinging to his collar. Decent folk, huh? Harlan said, voice low enough that Maya, standing behind the cracked door, had to lean closer to catch it. You mean the same ones calling a pastor's granddaughter soft for feeding hungry kids? Same ones sitting warm at home while her roof leaks on children sleeping on borrowed blankets? Sheriff, we ain't moving. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not till the work's done. The sheriff left then, but not with the thunder he came in on. He slammed the cruiser door, spun gravel out from under his tires like a boy showing off to an audience that wasn't there anymore. Windows rattled. Dogs barked behind rusted gates, but nobody opened a door to say a thing. That night, Maya watched from the chapel steps as the bikers settled in. They moved quiet, almost shy in the soft yellow glow spilling from the stained glass windows they'd promised to fix come daylight. Harlan stood off to the side, a sentinel in denim and oil and grief still clinging like an old bruise. Every so often he'd nod, a silent signal that turned leather and tattoos and boot scuffs into an unspoken wall no rumor could breach. They didn't waste time trying to prove themselves with words. They proved themselves with the sound of hammering where silence once dripped cold water through a busted roof. They unloaded fresh timber from trailers hitched to bikes that looked better suited for trouble than charity. They pried up rotted boards from the fence Maya's grandfather had painted himself when he first opened the doors to everyone nobody else wanted. They set new posts deep in the stubborn clay, tamping the dirt down with steel-toed boots and quiet curses Maya pretended not to hear through the open window. By the second morning, the rumors grew thorns. Whispers turned to phone calls to the sheriff, the landlord, the local paper that hadn't run a front page worth reading since Maya's grandfather's funeral. But the bikers just kept working, kept guarding, kept nodding at Maya when she brought them chipped mugs of the same coffee she'd served to the men who called her foolish behind her back. It wasn't just the fence or the roof or the church's broken front step that splintered under Maya's feet every time she locked the door at night. It was the way they did it without spectacle, without thanks, without expecting her to stand beside them like some prop for charity's sake. They did it like men who knew something about promises that outlast the noise. One afternoon, Maya stepped outside to find two of the roughest-looking among them, beards gone wild, arms sleeved in ink and old fight scars, crouched on the chapel steps. They'd laid down brushes and paint cans from the back of a pickup, so dented it looked like it had survived the same storms they had. Beside them, 3 kids from town. Kids Maya fed off stale bread and second-hand soup. Dipped tiny brushes into chipped coffee tins of white paint. The steps, once cracked and gray, now bloomed with the uneven promise of something brighter. The kids smeared more paint on their overalls than the wood. The bikers didn't mind. One of them knelt low, sleeves rolled to the elbows, voice low as he taught a little girl to dip her brush slow and steady so the paint wouldn't run. Maya watched from the top step, hammer still warm in her palm from patching another leak inside. She watched the same town that spat on her kindness, forced to look straight at the sight of rough hands bent gentle enough to help a child steady hers. The street beyond the fence stayed quiet that day. Blinds twitched open, then closed again, but the calls to the sheriff stopped ringing for a while. The engines still rumbled when dusk crept in, a promise that kindness was standing guard for once, loud enough that fear couldn't whisper over it. Maya Thompson, granddaughter of the town's first black pastor, stood barefoot on the chapel threshold and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this place she'd tried so long to save might have a chance to save itself back. By the end of that week, the chapel fence stood straight as an old spine finally braced right. The roof no longer wept when rain pushed across the plains. The kids came back before the paint dried, trailing muddy boots and soft laughter that clung to the pews like a hymn echoing in places that had long gone silent. The bikers didn't leave. Not yet. They moved like sentries. Some posted under the old oak, some perched on tailgates, boots crossed, arms folded beneath jackets patched with road stories that no preacher's sermon could outshine. To Maya, they were as much a blessing as any box of stale bread left on the chapel steps, just louder, bigger, and impossible to hide from the eyes that still dared to peek from behind shuttered blinds. One morning, dawn cracked open gentle like the world was holding its breath. Maya found Harlan Reed waiting near the side door of the chapel. He leaned against a post they'd set together only 2 nights before, fresh cedar still bleeding its sweet smell into the chill air. His helmet sat on the step beside him. His hands, those rough, oil-caked hands that once trembled asking a clerk for mercy, now rested calm on a thick manila folder, battered at the corners from miles of wind and road. "Morning, Miss Thompson," he said, soft as the hush in a pew before prayer. Maya stepped out, wiping drywall dust from her palms, heart steady, but curious. Harlan lifted the folder like an offering. He didn't push it into her hands yet, just held it there, a quiet weight waiting for her to claim it. "Need you to see this," he said. Maya nodded once, the way she always did when her grandfather would set a battered Bible in her lap and say, "Read it out loud. Let the words do their work." Harlan opened the flap, thumbed through papers that didn't look like salvation, but felt like it the second Maya caught the bold black letters. Release of lien, paid in full, tax office balance 0. Her breath caught behind her ribs like she'd run too far, too fast, and the air didn't know how to find its way back. "We did some asking around," Harlan said. "Knew you'd been patching more than leaks. Knew the county kept slipping envelopes under your door marked final notice. Figured." He cleared his throat, voice dipping rough like a Harley throttled too hard. "Figured you didn't need that weight anymore." Maya reached out, fingertips brushing the page. Her eyes tracked every line, every dry stamp proving that this land, her grandfather's promise, her own stubborn faith, was now free from paper chains that had threatened to choke it dead. "Who?" she whispered. But Harlan just shook his head, a small grin curling under his road-tired eyes. "Anonymous donor," he said. "Brotherhood ain't much on paperwork, but we know how to pass the hat when it matters." Few chapters kicked in. Some boys up north chipped in double what they had. Some folks Maya Thompson never met, and never will decided one good turn deserved something better than thanks. Maya pressed a hand to her mouth to catch the prayer or the tears, or both. Harlan set the folder down on the steps between them, then nodded toward the lot behind the chapel where 2 bikers in mismatched leather leaned against something long and silver hitched to the back of a flatbed. "Ain't much," Harlan said. but Maya could see in his eyes it meant the world. New kitchen trailer, gas hookup, fridge works, stoves big enough to feed an army, or at least a few dozen kids who ain't had a hot meal since your granddaddy passed. She stepped past him, hands trembling the way they did when she lifted the old cross above the pulpit and traced the trailer's clean metal with her palm. No rust, no cracks. It looked like something that shouldn't belong on this tired patch of dirt. And yet here it was. Here she was. Here they all were. It didn't take long for word to slip past fences that couldn't keep secrets anymore. The same neighbors who whispered her foolish in booths and barber shops now found themselves peeking through church windows they hadn't darkened in years. They watched rough men hammer fresh shelves into the Sunday school room, watched tattooed giants lift splintered benches with the same gentleness they'd once used to cradle lost brothers on rain-slick roads. One kid snapped a photo. Tiny fingers tapping a cracked phone, catching the moment two bikers with skull patches knelt beside giggling children repainting wooden chairs too small for grown men to fit. By sundown, that photo found its way to someone's niece who ran a blog nobody read until they did. And when they did, the town's hush burst wide open. A local news van rolled up 2 days later, antenna reaching for a signal the town didn't know how to hold. A young reporter, hair too neat for the chapel's cracked steps, filmed Harlan's crew fixing the fence line, hauling fresh timber, showing kids how to dip brushes slow so paint wouldn't run. The clip made its way past county lines, past state lines, until strangers from towns Maya had never stepped foot in sent messages, boxes of canned goods, new blankets for kids who'd slept cold so many winters they'd forgotten how warm felt when it stayed longer than a single Sunday. The old rumors didn't die so much as drown under the new roar, the deep thunder of engines rolling out every dawn to haul scrap wood, pick up second-hand shingles, find whatever piece the chapel needed next. And inside those walls, the laughter of children rose so clear that even the sheriffs muttered threats, the landlord's tight-lipped complaints, and the town's stale gossip cracked apart under the weight of something louder, wilder, and finally, good. Maya Thompson stood beneath the cross her grandfather carved from pine he'd milled himself. She held the keys to a trailer humming warm with promise. She held papers that proved no debt could close these doors again. And outside, she heard the engines idle. Softest prayer, a reminder that sometimes the loudest miracles are built on the backs of men the world once swore would never carry anything but trouble. By the time the last of the heavy clouds rolled off the town's back that spring, a hush settled over Maya's street. Not the hush of fear or closed blinds, but the hush of something softer, something earned. The bikers stayed longer than anyone guessed they would, long enough for the rumor mill to run out of poison, long enough for small kindnesses to sprout in the cracks where suspicion used to live. And when they finally rolled out at dawn, they left behind more than fresh timber and a roof that no longer wept. They left behind a silence that made space for new voices to be heard. It started slow like all good things do around here. First, a neighbor Maya barely knew. A man whose windows stayed nailed shut through storms and summers alike showed up with a half-empty paint can and an old brush. He didn't say much, just tipped his cap, dipped the brush, and set to covering the places the kids' little hands couldn't reach. Soon another joined him. Mrs. Everly from 2 doors down, hair pinned tight, mouth always pursed when Maya passed her in the grocery aisle. She came carrying a tray of fresh muffins she claimed were for the children, but she stayed to wipe dust from hymnals so brittle they coughed flakes of yellowed pages every time they opened. Underscored by week's end, Maya found herself standing in the back of the chapel, hands still cracked from scrubbing pews, watching people she'd grown up watching turn their backs on need finally turn toward it instead. They passed brushes, sanded splinters smooth, mended what their gossip had once let rot. None of them spoke about the engines or the men who'd come and gone like some thunderstorm that left sunlight in its wake. But when they worked beside Maya, their eyes said enough. "We see you now. We see this place, and maybe we see ourselves in it too." The landlord came last, the one man Maya never thought she'd see step through the heavy church doors for any reason other than to pry them shut for good. He knocked quiet on a Tuesday morning, hat in hand, shoulders hunched like a boy who'd been scolded too hard and too long. "Miss Thompson?" he started, voice stuck halfway between pride and regret. "About the lease, about all of it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I didn't see what I should have seen." Maya listened. She could have made him sweat. Could have turned him out onto the same cracked street she'd watched him stalk so many nights with folded threats in his coat pocket. But she didn't. Her grandfather's lessons were louder than her anger. "I forgive you, Mr. Kinsey," she said, steady as scripture. "But you understand these doors stay open." "Always," he nodded. He didn't have words enough to stitch up what he'd torn loose. But his silence was apology enough. Maya let him go with a blessing he'd never asked for, but would carry home like a stone worn smooth by the sun. The morning the bikers left, Maya rose early. She stepped barefoot onto the chapel steps, toes pressed to the boards that once bent soft under leaks, and years of prayers whispered into cracked plaster. Now they felt solid, steady beneath her feet. Ready. Harlan Reed stood at the end of the line, helmet tucked under his arm, leather vest zipped up tight. The roar of the Harleys was quiet this time, a low purr instead of a battle cry. She thought he might come up the steps, say something final, but Harlan only tipped his chin, eyes warm with something like relief, like a burden passed hand to hand until it lightened enough to carry easy. When the last engine grumbled down the street, a breeze caught Maya's hair and flipped a page loose inside the old pulpit Bible, the one her grandfather's fingerprints still marked in soft, worn edges. Tucked between the thin gilded sheets was a scrap of lined paper. No fancy letterhead, no official seal, just a note scrawled in a hand so big it pressed the ink near through to the next page. "One small kindness, one big family. You'll never stand alone again." No signature. No need for one. Maya pressed the paper flat against the gospel she learned at her grandfather's knee. She stepped out onto the steps, the sun warm on her shoulders, the last echoes of engines fading like thunder rolling off to bless another broken road somewhere else. She could almost see him there, Reverend Elijah Thompson, standing in the doorway behind her, nodding slow. That soft smile he wore when he reminded her that sometimes the quietest power in this world is not fists or fear or fences, but an open door and an open hand. Inside, the laughter of children danced across new floors, bounced from freshly painted walls, tangled in the sunbeams slanting through stained glass that glowed just a bit brighter than she remembered. Maya Thompson stood at the threshold of that small, stubborn church, a place the world once tried to forget, and knew deep in her bones that her grandfather would be proud. And for the first time in too many winters, the quiet in her chest sounded nothing like loneliness and everything like home. On a quiet Sunday that smells like fresh bread and cedar shavings, a new sign hangs steady above the church's weathered double doors. The letters catch the morning light in brushed bronze, each stroke carved by hands that know how to steady wood when storms come rough. It reads, simple as a blessing. Bell Community Sanctuary. All welcome. The town still calls it the old church sometimes, out of habit more than malice. But inside what fills those walls now is too alive to answer to any old name. Maya hums beneath her breath one of her grandfather's hymns. the melody curling around the rafters where rain no longer leaks through. At long folding tables, children spoon warm stew into chipped bowls that never stay empty for long anymore. Some in new coats, some in boots, 2 sizes too big because new things have a way of growing to fit. Their laughter drifts up through the open windows, trailing down the steps and out onto the street like a secret invitation to anyone passing by. Outside, the last winter's mud has given way to green shoots that press up brave through broken sidewalk cracks. And resting beneath the old iron bell, the one her grandfather rang every morning to call the forgotten home, sits a single biker helmet. No name stitched on its strap. No plaque to explain why it's there. Just a silent promise that the roar that once came to save this place is never far when kindness calls it back. Sometimes at dusk, when the sun slips off behind the chapel roof and the street grows quiet again, Maya steps onto the threshold and lets her eyes drift over that helmet. Steel and leather catching the last light like a beacon. And though no engine rumbles now, the message hangs steady in the hush. No kindness is ever wasted. Not here, not anywhere. If the story moved you, share it forward. Let someone know that even the smallest open hand can change the world. One broken fence, one warm bowl, one quiet promise at a time.